the stakeholders, which all of you also realize is a very important part that we often discuss during implementation and our programs. So what exactly is a stakeholder mapping? Let's start with who is a stakeholder. Stakeholder, simply put, will be any person who has an interest in your project. It can be a group of people, they would together form a stakeholder as well. It could be an institution, it could be an organization, or it could be singular individuals. They need to have an interest in the project, in the program, in the policy that we are working with. That essentially means a stakeholder. By interest, we mean they're bound to be affected. If a certain program fails or if it is successful, the people who are going to be affected by it will be your stakeholders. It could be negative or positive, the effect. So, like I said, when we have individuals, organizations, people and all types of groups here, it's bound to be, as we discussed yesterday, that the program and policies are often multidimensional and they cover various sectors. So by that logic, the stakeholders also would be different and diverse individuals. They are bound to be with different interest groups and representing different sectors. So somebody that we think a stakeholder should be or could be is, let's say, a technical specialist or a consultant that a government might hire. Other person can be your development partners. Oftentimes there are civil society organizations who are working on the field, who are working on a similar topic that the government program is also working with. So they also become a stakeholder or an interest individual. Then we have our NGOs, private voluntary organizations as well. It would also involve private entities or funding agencies because they have a vested interest in the program, in the policy at hand, or in the intervention. We have our district and regional administration. You guys, you are one of the major stakeholders in a program because you are the implementers, you are at times the decision makers. Your role might vary, yet you are a central stakeholder in a program. The national level program implementers or the national level program team. If it's it's an Anganwadi related scheme, it is going to be the Ministry of Women Child Development sitting somebody at the center, might also be a stakeholder in your project, depending on the level of the project. If it's a very small project running at a district, it might not engage somebody at a national level. We have, for instance, a Ministry of Health or a national general government, not your particular department, but a national government person. It could also be from a local level, somebody not a governmental person, but rather a community-based person. Your heads of panchayats, let's say, or your frontline workers, they would also be stakeholders. And lastly is our champions for change. Who are these champions for change? Champions for change essentially are people who are going to take forward your intervention, your implementation, who are going to help you implement it better, who might reach out to the communities in a much better way because they might be the influential figure in communities. So when we talk about a health program, your ashas would form, could be a champion for change. Or there are selected cadres that we form with particular schemes. So one of the programs that we were working in Varanasi constituency, they started something called a volunteer cadre, which used to carry forward their work or just talk to people about the work being done. So they became the champions for change because they were redoubling the efforts that were being done. If it was a scheme awareness, they would again go back to the houses of the beneficiaries, tell them about the scheme, or help them get enrolled, or give any kind of information. So they became our champions for change. We're going to carry forward the implementation, the intervention. What then becomes important is, because we have a diversity of people, diversity of roles who are going to be your stakeholders, it's important that we just don't think them as somebody who's going to be engaged in the beginning. They're not somebody who are a figurehead that, oh, we'll mention them during the design, but then just go once at the end and never interact with. Because of the role that they play, it's very important that we continuously engage with them. Like the Champions for Change example, they are the ones who can carry forward or help you with your implementation. So it's necessary that we engage with them continuously throughout our project. That's very important, because the more powerful engagement we might have, the more powerful our results can be, because they are helping us with the implementation. Also, like we took the example, it can help us facilitate the way we are implementing. So let's say if we are spreading awareness on a nutrition-related dietary diversity in households, a champion for change or a local stakeholder can help me redouble my effort, can help me just reach out to households which may not otherwise welcome me. It's very possible some groups might be wary of the government, they might not like how the government works, so they don't want to engage with government programs. But somebody who's a local influencer can help us reach out to those populations. So why? Since they play this role, they're from diversity of areas and diversity of levels, how do we engage with them? Because engagement is necessary, I can't just go about and start talking to every second person that I find in a community. That would be really long and a waste of a time. That won't solve my problem. And the next time I'd go, I'll just talk to another 3 people. So that doesn't help me realize that there needs to be a systematic engagement with people. And one of the common ways that you ever systemize is how you first list down the people or you map the stakeholders. So an important step that we often start doing in monitoring evaluations is mapping our stakeholders. That who is it, that who's going to be my stakeholder in this project? From an evaluator perspective, it can be the same from you, from an implementer perspective. Essentially, we have a couple of things that we might keep in mind when we are thinking about the stakeholders, because we can't just randomly start listing down people. That will be a forever activity otherwise. So we have the power and the interest that they might hold in our implementation or their level of engagement. So again, we'll do a very simple exercise and we'll see how all of us, because we work in very different sectors as well. So let's see who are the stakeholders that we might be engaging in. So again, we'll give you some cards, and what I need you to do is just draw up this table, each of you, and we'll start. First is the category or the name of the stakeholder, that who is the stakeholder. If you don't want to name a person, let's say, just put the title of the person, right? And second, we identify the categories which will be your larger group that they might belong to. So let's say if it is a supervisor who you think is an important stakeholder, you just put the stakeholder's name or you just put their title, and in the category you write senior leadership. Or maybe in your work, it's an ASHA worker who's an important stakeholder. So in the stakeholder, you'll write ASHA, and in the category, you'll write a frontline worker. Second, after we have put down the category, we put down their interest. So by interest, we mean that they have a vested interest in the program, in the intervention that you might be working with, right? And they might also know the intervention that you're working with. Lastly, what we want to put is, because we are talking about M&E, let's also add that a little bit just for me, that we will write what possible interest can they have in M&E. Because we did the very basics of how a monitoring can help a project, how an evaluation can help a project. So if you think, like the example we just took, it's an ASHA worker. If you think an ASHA worker can be helped with any M&E activity, so in the last column here, we'll write how they might be interested or how they might be affected by the M&E result. I'll come back to the column again so that you have the headings here. But these are the 4 things that we want you to fill, and possibly their interest, their role, it's the same thing that you can fill here, and what role do they play in the implementation, right? Your frontline worker can be a direct implementer, but your leadership can only be a decision maker. They might not be implementing. So that's their role, right? Let's all list down 3 people that we all interact with or who can be a stakeholder in any project that you're working right now or you might have worked with. Let's take a 15 minutes into thought, put thought into this, because these are people that you're everyday working with. So obviously for you guys it'll be easier. But let's start that and let's do that table. Also you can pair up if you want, but since all of you work on different sectors as well in different programs, I think it will be great if all of you also list down at least just 3 people that who are stakeholders for you. Any column that you want to ask, please feel free to ask us, me or Amratya. I'm really sorry I didn't introduce my colleague, that's Amratya, who's helping me out today and generally every day. So any column you want to read. Yes, so stakeholder is the person. Their title also might work if you don't want to name a person. Category is what category they belong to, from like let's say a frontline worker to senior leadership to the organizational head to a program head. Interest is what M&E interest or implementation interest, if you want to take it, they have. And participation is, or role is, what role can they have in, if I were to conduct a monitoring exercise or an evaluation exercise of that program, what role could they possibly have? So for example, a frontline worker could be a data collector in your monitoring because they are the ground force. Or your senior leadership can be an important person in developing the logic chain or the results chain that we discussed yesterday. They might, because they're not directly related, they are decision maker in categories. So their role can be in finalizing or reviewing any results or the monitoring that you do. So my example, I'll just say it here again, is my stakeholder is the ASHA worker, her category is the frontline worker. Her interest would be that she can use the results for reaching out to stakeholders. If my monitoring tells me that there are certain households that are continuously being missed, so an ASHA can use those results to reach out to those stakeholders. And her role in MLE can be a data collector, or even if she is using the results, it will be more than a data collector, but it is one of the roles. One stakeholder can have multiple roles in your evaluations. They can be the receiver also of the results. They can be an audience of the results. They can also be you collecting the data for you. Once you're done, you can share it either with us or you can come and put it here as well. So I'll just give another example for me. My supervisor, who's actually Dr. Vikas Chaudhary, his category is, he's my supervisor. His interest, he's interested in everything that I have to do. So it's just multi-interest, whatever we want to call it. But he's also, his interest forms in helping develop the tools for a evaluation or a monitoring, or at times data collection. He might supervise that or use the findings because we have to tell it to our partners, or eventually even dissemination of our results. There are several ways we disseminate result. It could be through, it could be obviously it's directly with the people that we are supposed to be reporting to, the funders, the government people, but it can also be through publications in a journal because we often do academic journals and we often work with them. It would also be dissemination through our workshops that we often hold, consultative workshops with the people who were interested in. And eventually, so his role also falls across various things. A similar experience it could be for you because you are the implementers, but at the same time you are also the commissioners of M&E. So if an M&E has to be done of your program, you are the one who will be commissioning it. You'll write the RFP, you'll tell what will be the terms of reference. So you're the commissioners of an evaluation exercise. You could be the people who are monitoring the data or the program. So you yourself would have various roles and interests. So for a lot of people and a lot of stakeholders groups, the interest and roles keep varying, except at times for beneficiaries of the community. But also we often, communities are always the people that we collect the data from. So that major role remains, but they should also be the users of your evaluation, your monitoring exercises, time to time. They should be getting the results of what we have collected from them. So different roles and interests will keep varying. So now, let's get back to what we sort of highlighted and started with yesterday, which was your results chain. So why is this so much focus on results chain and the results bit? And that entire thing actually originates from something called a results-based management, which is essentially focusing on results and not just actions. And that has happened as a government, as a national policy. So the Niti Aayog or the Planning Commission actually started functioning, that they started saying that my budget does not only need to reflect the actions that I've taken, it also needs to reflect the results that are coming through, the goals that I am achieving. Because if I keep telling my actions in budgets, it's not justifying fully that what have been the results, whether the money has been spent properly. So that entire focus here in a results-based management, as the name suggests, is on results and not just actions. So we are converting things from action to results. The language itself shifts, right? So an example could be, the activity is providing supplementary nutrition. I give the take-home ration to the community people. Instead of providing supplementary nutrition, that is an action, the focus now shifts to improved nutritional status, which is my result. Because we are all working towards achieving certain goals and more focus on results. So here we shift from providing supplementary to improved nutritional status. And because we are focusing on results, my entire performance is also measured on results. My entire theorizing of a program happens on results now. And what are results? Basically, we try to understand results as something which can be measured. A change that has happened which can be measured or described. Because something that is very difficult to describe will be something that I can't really show as my performance. If I just very intangibly say something, oh, I talk to people, that's not really going to help unless I have a measurable indicator or evidence for it, that I actually conducted so many discussion or so many meetings. That becomes more of a describable or a measurable change. And results is something that is more measurable and describable. Now, what are the core elements of this results-based management that we are talking about? One, everything, let's keep in mind, everything is focused or revolving around results. So when the first element here is timeliness or timeline of change, we want to understand whether results were achieved within time. So the change needs to happen on a certain timeline. The projects obviously come with a certain timeline, right? It can't be that I'll say, oh, I'll achieve my results in some years. I have to define it, because nobody is going to really take that some years can mean 3 for you and it can mean 10 for Amratya. That might not work, because there needs to be an accountability of where the program is going on. Second, we have the relevance of strategy. So whether whatever activities and strategies that I'm doing, are they even relevant to the beneficiaries who are going to be the resulting party, right? If I do something that's not even relevant to them, the entire logic does not really work. Next is areas of improvement. So whatever information or results that I have got, how can they help me improve? So my results are also my areas of improvement. I need to work with that mindset. How can I improve? So results information is going to help me with that. Next is identification of KPIs. By KPIs, which sir also mentioned yesterday, if you remember, was the key performance indicators. We have those in every form of life generally. They are also a measurement of how we are performing in our jobs. All of us have KPIs. One of my KPIs, for instance, is writing a certain number of proposals. So that's a result that I need to show to my organization, that I've written these many proposals and I have won these many proposals of evaluation. So KPIs are key performance indicators, which are my indicators of my results. They are going to tell me how my results are going to be measured. Next is the fidelity of assumptions. Essentially, by assumption, we means everything that can happen outside or that is going to affect your result. Assumptions is something that is going to take place. So how true are the assumptions that I have taken into account? Whenever, if I'm saying that I'm going to conduct a training, the assumption is people are going to come for training. I will always have to keep that in mind to define my results, that the government officials in Meghalaya were trained. If this is my result, let's say, and nobody even came to my training, so my assumption falls flat, so my result never gets achieved. There are always going to be assumptions with your results. And when comes assumptions, there also come risks. That there is a possibility that the day my training happened, there was a huge cyclone, nobody could come, so there was a risk that affected my assumption. Lastly is the reporting on results. Because everything is about results, our management is focused on results, we need to report in terms of results, not just actions. I just don't need to tell that I conducted so many trainings. The idea is whether it even helped. Because I can go on doing that. If it doesn't help, it's not really a useful exercise. This was the result chain that we looked at yesterday that Kezia described somewhat, right? So let's articulate it a little better. First is our inputs, which is the resources. So it's use. What did I use? What are the resources that I have? By resources, we have money, we have infrastructure, we have people, so human resources, financial resources, infrastructural resources, everything of that sort is a resource or something that I use, the input that I have with me. Next is the process, which is my activities. I was given those resources. How did I use those resources to do something? So process is do. For my training, the resource would be a hall, a venue. That's an infrastructural resource that I have. The activity is me doing the training. So the training being conducted is an activity. Output is what we have delivered through that activity. So if I delivered training. I delivered knowledge or awareness on M&E. So the idea or the assumption or the expectation is that if I am training or giving a training on M&E, the knowledge on M&E would increase, hopefully, if I am not really bad. Outcome is something that is eventually the objective that we want to achieve. So what we achieved. So the change in knowledge for you would be your output, and after you have gained that knowledge, tomorrow you will go back and maybe do a monitoring exercise. So that's an outcome, that you are able to use that knowledge further on to achieve something, to achieve a monitoring, because that was the aim I eventually had for my training. And lastly is our impact or the goal that we said yesterday. What am I contributing to? Because the entire purpose of the monitoring evaluation essentially is that I want to improve my program management. I want to improve the results of my program because I want to monitor, help improve, and eventually achieve better results. So that last is what have I contributed to. So all of this between output, outcome, impact is my results. This is the hierarchy of results or the results chain that I follow. So oftentimes or wherever you talk about or you see somebody talking about results chain, this is what they're talking about, simply put. So the what is your input, the when is your process, the why is your outputs, the how, who, where, these are certain questions that you are addressing. They all fall onto results because how could also be an output and it could also be an outcome. How did I achieve that result? because I had so many people whose knowledge had increased. So certain bits that are being explained through the results chain that we have here. We'll be working and defining these for our projects as well. So if any of you want to have any doubts, want to ask anything, we can just do it now, or we'll also be doing it, so please feel free to ask then as well. So this was results-based management, and the core idea of results-based management is my results chain. Now, how do I do results-based management? Essentially, how do I do my results chain is articulating that results chain happens through a theory of change. Every program is supposed to have or should have a theory of change. What is a theory of change? Like the name suggests, it is a theory of how the change will happen. So it's a theory describing how the change will happen. Articulating that what is the change that I want to achieve and how I want to achieve that change. So since I'm saying what is the change and how I want to achieve, this should mean that I should have a way to achieve the change. I should have something in mind of how I want to achieve, which is a pathway of change. And it's a very flexible tool. While I'm saying that you need to have a theory of change before you start implementing, you can also use it later on. Because if at the beginning, let's say I have designed a theory of change and it showed me that this is my path for change. Now I want to see that I want to reach from point A to point B. And there were 3 steps that I've said my theory of change will have. If I developed it at the beginning, I know that this is the path I'll follow. Now, how can it be helpful in the middle of the program? Because it is possible that my intention of going like this has gone like this and I am stopped here. So I have not reached where I was supposed to. So again, I look back at my theory of change and I see that how I wanted to reach, but there was some glitch that happened. So maybe I need to rethink my strategies and maybe I need to get back like this, right? So in the middle also it can help, and at the end, if I actually achieved it like this or if I achieved it like this, I need to know how I achieved it so that I can replicate it, I can help somebody else with that, or I can just understand what went wrong, how can I correct it. So theory of change can be helpful at middle of the intervention, towards the end, or even should be there before the intervention happens. It also includes a couple of more things, which is what we just earlier were talking about in results-based management, assumptions. Something that will happen, that is bound to happen, right? That when my change is happening, there are certain assumptions I'll always have. And associated with the assumptions are the risks. The example that we just took, that my assumption is if I'm giving a training and I showed my theory of change that I gave training, I achieved a better implementation of programs in Meghalaya. The assumption was that people actually came to take the training. The next step is obviously knowledge. So there the assumption was they actually gained knowledge and used the knowledge. So if I just give you any training, you take it back home and you never really use it. So my assumption that the knowledge was actually used does not really work. So if I have an assumption, there are bound to be risks that could affect that assumption or my pathway. So these are a couple of your elements of theory of change. What we just discussed, which were inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, impact, and assumptions and risks across all stages. How I wanted to convert my activity to output will have certain assumptions. How my output will get converted to an outcome will also have certain assumptions. We'll also take an example so that it gets clearer. Let's also see why do we need theory of change. Whatever we've been discussing right now helps obviously give certain obvious answers to why a theory of change can be important. Some things are, if I already have a theory of change, I have put down what are going to be my activities, my outputs, my outcomes. I have clearly articulated at the beginning what my change is going to be. So it always helps because later I can map back. If it was something only in my head that I wanted to do and achieve this, I'll never have a tangible evidence of it. And I can't really show it and explain it to others that, this was what I thought, but I never wrote it down, so I can forget something tomorrow. So it helps because it's explicitly describing my program, my activities, my outcomes, and my impacts. Second, if I have already noted down what my results are going to be, I am bound to be less biased towards it. It is possible that if I don't have those noted down, I might think that, oh, this is what's happening. Maybe I should just tweak my results and say I will achieve this much only. But I have it articulated. I will have a boundedness to it. Also, if I have a theory of change, it will help me plan for monitoring and evaluation better. Because I have benchmarks for what to evaluate, what to monitor. It's embedded in the program design because we are starting at the design phase, because we are and because we are discussing how the change and program will bring in the change. So it's always embedded within the design. It creates a pathway for change. It's a guide for measurement of my success. Because my success is my outputs and outcomes, my impact, it's a guide for telling me and measuring that. It provides a framework for decision making. If I have all of it mapped out, I can take decisions better. My supervisor can know that within 3 years, I will achieve this much. So they can take decisions that at the end of 3 years, this is the next part we want to do. Because I have it well articulated and decided. Obviously, we have to keep in mind, it won't always be this linear. Never a straight line, because that's not how the real world works. It's not, and that's why we have assumptions also. It's not always I said A to B to C and that's how things happen. They're never in real life. They can be articulated, but at times, because that's easier to plan it or represent it, but it's going to take some movement here and there that's going to happen, and that's how theories of change will work. They will keep revising also, because certain things might happen which are out of our control. So there are, which is like out of our control, so there are always things that we can certainly control for, or we can decide and think about, right? Which is our sphere of control. That I know if this is the resource I have, this is the input and activity that I can do. I had 5 crores, so I could do 15 trainings. That is in my hand. That is my area of control. But something I could not achieve a result out of that training, that is outside my area of control. That becomes my sphere of influence. So if this is my entire thing that I planned, my inputs and my activities, this is my area of control. And outside lies the influence sphere, which is outside my influence. That certain things are beyond me. I can't control whether for people to not come to the training. I can't control whether people are actually taking it back with them. I can only give certain, I can teach something and I can discuss something. If they don't use it, that's out of my hand. So that's my sphere of influence. That's really important to take note of. You might not need to write it every time when we're preparing a theory of change, but it's something to take into account. So this was the theory of change components that we showed, which is also essentially your results chain, your inputs, the resources, your processes are the activities, outputs are the immediate results. Always keep in mind the short-term results or the immediate results are called outputs, and the intermediate or slightly longer term are called the outcomes. Something that is not going to be achieved immediately. And impact are the long-term goals or the goals that we want to achieve. Stunting is not something a single program is going to achieve, and that's my impact. So we always contribute to impact. We can never directly say that only one program directly led to a change in stunting. So it's always about contributing, and always when we're trying to articulate what an impact is going to be, it is something that is at a broader, larger level. Things like maternal mortality, or a stunting, wasting, or an increase in the income or a farm income for an agricultural program, let's say. So that's something that's a very long-term thing. I can't do it, even in time it will be a long-term thing. I can't do it tomorrow, or let's say even 1 year down the line, because those are very hard to move things. Outcome is the intermediate. If I've given a training, the knowledge is what you have attained. My outcome is you using it, which if I am being very logical, or let's say I'm being rational, it can happen in the next year, right? It can be within 2 years that you might start doing monitoring. So that is something that's an outcome. Again, we just discussed that through our theory of change, we're trying to make a link between our activities or the inputs that we had to the results that we are achieving, which is your outputs, outcomes, and impact. We are thinking about assumptions, which are conditions on how the change will happen and the risk that may affect it. And lastly, there are always, yesterday we placed importance on what a context is. So context will eventually play a part, because context also is something that you can't really change through your intervention. The beliefs, the culture that exists is your context, the political context. So through my programs, I can't change it, but it is something that is going to affect my program. If tomorrow a government comes that does not like a certain program, it stops it. That is a context that I couldn't change, but it still played a role in how my results were achieved, or maybe not achieved at all. Okay, I think let's take a break. We have our tea break right now, and then we'll come back and take an example of how do we create a theory of change, and we'll do an exercise. We'll create a theory of change, something a very simpler ones that you guys do or use with your programs.